Hello, welcome to the Client Catching Podcast. Now, as I realised that the scheduled date for this episode was going to be Christmas Eve, I actually thought, well, why don't I do something that's a little bit out of character and make it a bit of a festive version? Now, why do I say out of character? Well, depending if you're listening to the audio version, you won't be able to see this, but if you're watching the video, you will be able to see that I have my Christmas jumper on today. You'll also, if you are listening to the show, you may well realise that I am also a little bit of a Star Wars nerd. So my Christmas jumper has Darth Vader on it, and it says "Bar Humbug" and all the rest of it. But I guess I have been in the past accused of being a bit of a Grinch, and I don't know. I think it's more to do with previously sort of getting just having to deal with Christmas starting in August sometimes and all the rest of it. But I guess now that I've got two kids under the age of 5, I'm starting to see that Christmas is far more than just the commercialism and the consumerism that goes around with it and all the rest of it. And I guess I'm softening a little bit in my old age potentially, but I guess also there is I get a bit of a message in the humbug thing and all the rest of it, because obviously this is being recorded in 2020, and depending on where you are living, I mean, we, for example, live in just outside London, so we have been hit by the tier 4 restrictions. So all our plans for Christmas and all the rest of it, not that I have a particular, we don't have a particular big family, but all we were doing was planning on going to see my brother and nephews and having a Christmas Eve there, and then we were going to share just Christmas Day at home. But obviously now we're not doing the Christmas Eve thing, but we'll probably do a Zoom call and see the kids anyway, and have the kids sort of play together. But it was always going to be a small affair. But there are many people out there that have obviously had all of their plans scuppered, all of their, I guess, their expectations after a really challenging year for a lot of people. And there is an awful lot of anxiety and anger and all sorts of things going on at the moment. And that's just from a personal perspective. I'm not even talking from a sort of business side of things, but I guess I just wanted to first of all wish everybody out there that listens to the show a very Merry Christmas, and I sincerely mean that. I am not going the humbug route or anything. I think that whatever you're doing, whatever's happened over the past 12 months, however the restrictions have impacted your plans for Christmas, enjoy it in whatever way you can. It might be easier said than done, because you might be in a situation where you're on your own and you can't see friends and family and all the rest of it, but try and make the most of it. Try and take this time to reset a little bit, take a breath and enjoy it, because there are times that we will always look back on, and maybe this is part of my humbug thing is sort of coming back. I'm remembering a lot of my childhood, and I used to love Christmas, and I'm seeing that in my daughters and getting excited, and these are the sort of things that you don't get back. And maybe if you've got grandchildren or anything like that, and you're not going to be able to see them in person, that's going to be tough. Again, try and use some of the technology that's around and do it. I know it's not the same, but it's all about appreciating what we have. And I think there's a few things. I guess I'm kind of waxing on lyrical here. I'm not going on any preconceived ideas. I'm sort of, I guess this isn't a stream of consciousness more than anything, but the year's been tough. It's not been easy. I think certainly from my perspective, thinking about it from business, it's been a time to make sure that I keep perspective. It's to see how things are operating in terms of a bigger picture. And I think that's something that we don't always take the time to do. And sometimes that big picture requires a complete redrawing. Sometimes it requires a little bit of an adjustment. Maybe you need to erase a little bit and all the rest of it. And I'm kind of talking metaphorically here about looking at the strategy, getting perspective in terms of, okay, this situation has happened. It's impacted my big business in this way, but are the fundamentals of the business still sound? And if they are, how can we build on those? And if sometimes I think that over the last few, obviously the last 12 months, some people have been exposed that their foundations are not solid. And so therefore that is the thing that needs to be looked at. What are the foundations? Is the strategy in place? Are you targeting the right market? Are you talking to your ideal clients in the right way? All that kind of thing. And it's kind of getting that perspective and then looking at what has worked over the last 12 months and what can you do more of? What can you optimize? What hasn't worked? Have are there things that you still need to work on in terms of adjusting the way that you deliver to clients? Is there ways that you need to adjust how you market and sell to clients and price and all that kind of thing? It's sort of going back and getting that perspective there. And I think for me, it's been a reminder that change is always going to be there. It's inevitable. I think the quote is that the only constant in life is change. That's the only thing. And I think that this situation in this year has hit a lot of people in terms of actually having to remind those people, remind you that it's not always going to be plain sailing. You're going to hit a storm along the way. There's going to be things you're going to need to adjust the sails. You're going to have to bring them in. You're going to have to ride out the storms and things like that. So it's kind of like the inevitability. And then thinking in a way, it's kind of like, well, there are some things as well, because of the change, that are going to be out of your control. There are things that are completely out of your control. So the only thing that we can do, both as individuals, as people, and as business owners, is control what we can control. I mean, if you own a business in the hospitality sector, then you cannot control the fact that everything has been shut down. But what can you control? You can control how you react to it. There's so many examples of people that have pivoted and done things online and started teaching people how to cook their meals and done takeaway services and gone into other different things. And there's so many great examples of that. So you can't control that you can't open your doors to people necessarily, but you can control some of the things that you can do as a response. And it's the same with your emotions. I spent quite a lot of time at the beginning of this getting frustrated and angry and all the rest of it, because the shutdown and the lockdown at the beginning of the year meant that we had no childcare. My wife and I, self-employed, we work in the same office and we operate two separate businesses, and it basically meant that with two children under the age of 5, we were running two businesses on 3 hours, and that was frustrating. And I ended up getting a little bit lost in there and frustrated. But then I realized, well, I can only control what I can control. I have essentially 3 hours a day to work. What can I do? How can I do it different? How can I do it better? And that thinking has continued into the sort of the latter half of this year. And it's going to mean that I am changing things and I am doing things more optimally, and I have made I've made changes around what I actually offer and how I actually serve clients to do it in a more effective way, to get them results, but also allow me to be able to leverage the time that I have. So there's some things coming and changing in the business that I'm sure I will be talking about, but also that has led to some things, and I think I mentioned it on the last episode, that there's going to be some changes around the podcast to reflect some of these changes. It's going to be much more around collaboration. It's going to be around thinking that, and again, that's something that this year has become apparent. I know a lot of people, myself included, we've become isolated. There's been that sort of I guess the loneliness around it, the missing of being able to talk with other people and things like that. And when you run your own business, it can be a lonely place at the best of times. And this has obviously, I guess, amplified it, especially if you have very little or have over the year experienced times where you've literally been on your own and completely isolated away from your team and all that kind of thing. And so it's that whole thing around collaboration and realizing that a rising tide lifts all ships, and that we cannot do anything all on our own, even if we're isolated. So it's kind of around the idea that it's a collaborative effort to get everything back. There is going to be no new normal, but it's going to require so much more collaboration to get us back to a place, once all of this is finished, that everybody gets to, I guess, benefit and pick up. And it may be different to the world that we left, but we can't do it alone. it's impossible. It's kind of like I believe that collaboration is a currency, and that is some of the things that we'll be looking at doing with the show in terms of I want to hear from people around the actual challenges that you have right now. I want listeners of the show to send in some of the challenges they're facing now, because when I'm bringing on some experts, we are going to literally brainstorm these challenges for you on the show. We are going to take some of those things that are going on in your businesses, in actual people's businesses, and spend time literally coming up with ideas and solutions for you in real time. And I guess it's a bit like I guess it's the thinking behind it is that there is a bit of a mastermind element to it. It's kind of like a hot seat without you physically being put on the hot seat. And it just means that we can help, because if you've got a challenge, then I'm sure other people out there are going to have a challenge. So they'll also benefit from hearing the ideas. And I'm toying with with ideas of not just having a single guest on, but bringing on almost like a panel of guests to discuss a number of problems and challenges and things like that over time. So it's all about collaboration. It's all about how can we help our fellow business owners, our fellow entrepreneurs, our fellow solopreneurs, people that are out there every day trying to build a great business based on the awesome value that they provide. And that is where I want to move the show to. That's where I'm moving the business to. It's all about collaboration. It's all about helping each other, because, as I say, a rising tide lifts all ships. And I think that it can become, and if we all think about it a little bit more, it's kind of like when you look at things through a collaborative lens, you start to see that there is no real competition, and it's kind of like the antidote to isolation. And if you approach the world of how can I help rather than what can I take, it's all going to be a lot different. So that's my thoughts. That's my train of consciousness, and I'm going to try and stop myself before I do go off. But the one thing I want to, I guess, end with is, no matter what's happened, you could have lost a business, lost loved ones, heard, or there's so many awful stories out there, but find one thing to be grateful for, just one. I mean, my story is not from this year, but there was a period when my eldest daughter was born, and she was born with needing surgery. She had something called a duodenal atresia, which meant that she had to have surgery on her stomach after on the second day that she was born. And that was tough, becoming a father at that time, for the first time and all the rest of it. But with all that goes along with it. But then 6 weeks later, after we'd got my eldest daughter Molly home, I found out that my mum had terminal cancer, and she'd been struggling with multiple sclerosis the majority of her adult life. And that was devastating, because she died, I think, 2 or 3 weeks later. And I sat with her in the room that she, me and my brother brought her home, and I sat with her for 8 days. I didn't want to leave her, and I wanted to make sure that I could do everything I could to keep her comfortable. And that was one of the hardest things that I've ever done. My entire identity changed over 6 weeks. I went from being less responsibility because I was married, to a father, to having to take my mum through this terrible passing. And there was dark moments after that. There was all sorts of things, and there were times where I could not find anything to be grateful for. But towards the end, I realized actually there was one thing that I was grateful for, and that was that I found, well, obviously I was grateful for my wife and my daughter and all the rest of it. It was just hard to see in the moment. But there was one situation where my mum had lost contact with her best friend, and I just became grateful that I was able to find her at the end. It was through, I don't know if it's because of my abilities with online marketing or anything like that, but basically, I tried to find her before. Long story short, I'd forgotten that the name that we knew her as children was not her real name. and then I managed to find her via social media and all the rest of it. Contacted her, and she lived up in the Lake District, and we managed to sort of get in contact. And she came down, and she got there 10 minutes before my mum died. And I know that my mum knew that she was there, and it was the one thing that she wanted to do, because she wanted to say goodbye, because she was her best friend. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that. So even in the hardest times, I don't know where I've gone with this. I did not intend on this. Even in the hardest times, there are things that you can find to be grateful for, because I try not to look back on that time now with sadness. I try and look back on that time of hope and being grateful for the things that I could do, because I couldn't stop the inevitable, but I could do everything I could to make things good for Mum. And that's all I could do. And that is the same here. So I didn't really mean to go there. I really didn't. I genuinely didn't. I want to leave this just with, a message of Merry Christmas, and let's try and lighten the mood. This well, now it's not going to work probably. Here we go. Do. If you're listening on the podcast, that is my my silly Christmas jumper now playing a tune of the of the Empire's Death March. Anyway, so all I want to say is, whatever you are doing this Christmas and over the holiday period, make sure you enjoy it. And until next time, Merry Christmas and happy fishing. Bye-bye.